Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation of the Township of Portsmouth, February 26, 2025, special council meeting. We'll start with roll call. Councillor Hurst. Councillor Goida.
Present.
Councillor Spoulos.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
So we begin our moment of reflection. These are moment of reflection. So question, confirmation of the agenda, please.
The council approves the February 26, 2025 agenda as circulated.
You get a mover, please. Councillor Spoulos, Councillor Goida.
Yeah.
All in favor? Carried. And disclosure of pecuniary interest today.
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Item 6.1, presentation by MPG Planning Solutions Inc. regarding the Portsmouth by Design Phase 3 and 4. I live on Sidewalk 20. I previously declared that I have a pecuniary interest in a proposed rezoning of a property on Sidewalk 20 North, a study area for the Portsmouth by Design study. Phase 3 and 4 includes all properties on the east side of Sidewalk 20 from Bunker Road 34 to Forestdale Road as one of the options for redevelopment. This further requires me to declare pecuniary interest of any development may have an impact on the value of my property. I cannot accordingly participate in any discussions and decisions regarding the study.
All right.
Just for clarification, is it just for that area of the study?
I have, I've checked with, the Federal Commission, and it's for the whole study. I can't discuss. Perhaps when we go further down after that, I don't know if I'll ask them about that. Right now, it's for the entire study. We tried to have the study separated into distinct areas, and I'll have to
Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay. All right, we'll turn it over. Presentation.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Seeley, members of council, members of the public who are watching this evening. My name is Mary Lou Tanner. I'm president of NPG Planning Solutions, and we are the consultants to you in the County of Wellington on Portsmouth by Design, which is an employment land study for the township and the county official plan. I apologize to members of the public. I'm going to be looking to my right to see the presentation slide deck, and then at the end we can have a discussion and some questions. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this study arises from the County of Wellington official plan, and the outcome of part of the work of that official plan was to identify additional lands in Portsmouth for employment use, and it's a minimum of an additional 30 hectares. The study that we are doing is to identify a preferred location and then identify the requirements to update the county official plan, as well as any additional matters such as design guidelines or things that would help proceed with the implementation of development in lands. So that includes the development framework, as I mentioned, the official plan policies and design guidance, and it'll be called a rural employment area because it will be outside of what's considered a settlement area, which are in Portsmouth's case are Aberfoyle and Worston. Next slide, please. So this is the study area that was established by the county and the township prior to us joining the project team. It was after discussions with the province of Ontario as well. It does reflect a fairly large area. The 401 traverses it. It adjoins Highway 6, both north and south. It does respect the Greenbelt boundary to the south, which is why it has a bit of an odd shaped boundary, a squiggly line, if I can describe it that way. And within the study area, there's some existing uses, as you can see from the air photo. There's some quarries. There's also proposed road improvements, as well as some existing designated employment lands, as there are some employment uses, which you can pick up from the air photo as well. We'll go to the next slide, please. So we're here to talk this evening about phase 3 and phase 4 of the study. And phase 3 is the detailed planning study, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. And phase 4 identifies 8 options for where the rural employment lands could potentially be located, and some initial findings on the strengths and weaknesses and some of the issues that we may see with each of those options. There is no recommended option at this point, and there won't be a recommended option until we get into phase 5. So part of tonight is to hear from council, your feedback on the various options, and later this evening at the community center to hear from members of the public. Once we get all of that feedback, we'll be able to refine everything and then apply the evaluation criteria and come back with some findings and recommendations. So on to the phase 3 study. It is about the land use planning framework, and it has details on the important elements, the principles, what we call the principles of land use for this study, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. We are in a circumstance in Ontario where we've had a number of changes to provincial legislation and policy. So to the best of our ability, we've kept up with it. And if there are more changes, we will go back and refresh the reports to incorporate those changes. And you may recall that there was a new provincial planning statement issued and came into effect on October 20th of last year. And the phase 3 report does address that provincial planning statement. We also speak to the importance of types of land use, typically and will be dry industrial uses because there's not municipal water and wastewater provided in the township. So it will be privately provided water and septic services. And we identify a series of policy directions related to land use and transportation connectivity, urban design, and also individual site design and site connectivity. And also, we've brought in reference to the design guidelines for the township. I did mention earlier that there are 6 principles of land use in the phase 3 detailed study report. Although they're not on the slide, they are as follows. First, proximity to major transportation infrastructure and existing employment areas. There's a lot of really strong opportunities within the study area for both. We want to identify large parcels of land. We had Parcel Economics do some market research and market sounding interviews, and that feedback came back from industrial developers as well as their own information as they track across Southern Ontario. We want to include employment serving uses, so those related businesses that can be provided subject to the new provincial planning statement, which does limit what can go in employment areas. We want to be compatible with rural character, recognizing that there are a variety of land uses from aggregates to existing clusters and individual homes, and that they have a character on the landscape that we want to pay attention to. The 5th one is compatibility with rural residential uses. That too is important. As we get into the specific options, you'll see that there are a number of different areas in the rural fabric that have clusters of homes as well as individual homes, and they are communities that we really want to pay attention to. And finally, avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts on the natural heritage system and the agricultural system. Both of those have been incorporated into the options. So when we get to those, you will see the natural heritage system and you will see the MDS circles that were created in the phase 2 report. We'll go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the phase 4 report is what we call the land options report. It identifies 8 preliminary options and does provide a high-level summary of initial findings on each of those. We do calculate what we call the gross area, which is what has been mapped, and then we take it to a net number, which takes out any constrained lands, and that would include natural heritage features as an example. So we understand the developable land area. And any aggregate uses that are active have been removed from consideration. They are actively quarried, and while they may be future options for rural employment areas, it is a very long-term consideration, and quarrying would need to conclude. So we took those out of the equation, although some individuals from the public did think that might be an option. Right now, we don't believe it is an option because this is an immediate need that the county has identified. As I mentioned, the final recommendation will come forward in the next phase after we get through the feedback we're going to receive today, this evening, and do a more detailed analysis of each option. So let's go to the next slide, please. So just want to touch on the assumptions that we made in identifying the options. And the first is there needed to be accessibility to transportation infrastructure. These are going to be employment uses, and they do need good road connectivity, and we want to make sure that they have access to the provincial highway system. We did identify areas with a minimum of 30 hectares of land area on a gross basis. We used a setback of 70 meters from any residential homes and clusters of homes, and that's related to land use compatibility, We anticipate that the land use permissions will be for light and medium industrial uses. So that does achieve the 70-meter requirement. A heavy industrial use would be 300 meters. We're not planning for heavy industrial here. Typically, they do require municipal servicing as well. We did use the minimum distance separation criteria from livestock facilities as well as any manure facilities that are in the study area. We avoided the Greenlands system, both core and the Greenlands designation, to the greatest extent possible. So you'll see on the options, they too have somewhat of an odd shape in certain areas because we just are not going to designate the Greenland system as part of the employment use. And we have identified connectivity to either existing communities such as Aberfoyle or existing rural employment areas in looking at where the options could be. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this slide gives you a summary of the 8 options. They are shown in pink on this map. The purple are existing designated rural employment areas. The yellow is the settlement areas of Aberfoyle and Morriston, and then you can see the study area boundary as well. And this tells you where the options are, and on the side, you can see the gross acreage and the net hectares. So just as a reminder, net removes natural heritage system where it is present within one of the options. We'll go to the next slide, please. So let's take these in order. They are not ranked. They are A to H, and there is no preference at this particular time. So option A is Concession Road 7 and Maltby Road West. And you can see outlined in pink where it would be. It is near existing transportation infrastructure and does have connectivity to the existing rural employment lands in the north part of the study area. There is some proximity to Aberfoyle as well, and you can see those circles, which are in yellow and blue, are the MDS circles. One is the livestock facility, the other is manure facilities. So you can see that it's not really impacted by the MDS requirements. However, what doesn't play in his favor is even with the odd shaped pink boundaries, there are natural heritage features within the option, which will limit development potential further. And it is a rolling topography, so it is a bit more challenging for development and getting roads in and sewers in and things like that. Next slide, please. So option B is Side Road 20 North and Wellington Road 34, and it is on either side of the new road infrastructure. It does have very good transportation access to the existing highway system. It has frontage on both sides of the new interchange of Wellington Road 34, and it does connect again to those purple existing employment lands. However, it is a bit challenged because of some of the natural heritage features, which you can see on the eastern half of the option. There is a fairly significant distance to the existing settlement areas, particularly in Aberfoyle. There are some livestock facilities, and you can see that there are some residential housing clusters nearby. And the reason option B has part of the air flow between the residential cluster and the outline of the pink, that is the 70-meter distance from those existing homes and their property boundaries. This one is 56.82 hectares on a gross basis. When we take the natural heritage system out, it is 43.4. Next slide, please. Option C is just north of option B on Side Road 20 North and Highway 6. It is just under 60 hectares on a gross basis and doesn't really have a lot of natural heritage system that impacts it. It is fairly flat, although there is a bit of rolling topography, but it's flatter than other areas. There are minimal green lands. It is adjacent to other rural employment uses, and it does have frontage on Highway 6. There are an awful lot of housing clusters nearby. There are significant livestock constraints adjacent to it. Even though it has frontage on Highway 6, the access is going to be constrained because of limited access to Highway 6. And it does front on township roads, which would mean they are designed for lower traffic volumes, so it doesn't provide the same level of transportation access as perhaps some of the other options, as we just saw with option B. Let's go to the next one, please. Option D is Highway 401 and concession 7. It is quite large, as you can see in the pink area. It has almost 100 hectares, and on a net basis, it gets to 86 hectares, and you can see the pockets of natural heritage features in it. It does have visibility from Highway 401, although wouldn't have access to Highway 401. It does have frontage on concession 7, which is a truck route because of the quarry across the street. There is fairly efficient and access to the highway system, as well as multiple options to get to the highway system. It is near other rural employment areas, but they are on the other side of 401, and it is a flatter topography. This option 2 is near some residential housing clusters. There are some livestock constraints, and there are some of the greenlands constraints, but certainly not as much as some of the other options we've just looked at. We'll go to option E, please. So option E is just east of option D and south of Highway 401. It does have visibility from Highway 401, which is something that Parcel Economics indicated was important from their market sounding interviews. It doesn't really have livestock constraints, but it does have proximity to other rural employment lands. There are some greenlands issues, as you can see in the bright green that goes through the middle and where the letter E is. There's not great road infrastructure according to the analysis done by our transportation consultant. And the eastern portion of this one is owned by MTO. So this option is not going to be carried forward. With the property ownership and MTO's work on the Highway 6 bypass, Morriston bypass, these lands would be a longer term development. And it doesn't really get us to the point where we want to have the minimum 30 hectares available for development. So the lands that are owned by MTO would take this option well under 30 hectares for immediate development. So it will not move forward into detailed analysis. We'll go to the next one, please. Option F is just near Aberfoyle and does have proximity to it. It does have pretty good access to the transportation system and connectivity to other rural employment lands. Although you can see that there are minimal greenlands constraints. The ability to define an option in this area is constrained by the greenlands going on around it and the study area boundary. There are very few livestock constraints here, but it is less than 30 hectares in area, and there is a significant residential community just to the north of it on Gilmore Road. This option, even though it's under the 30 hectares, will be carried forward. Although we're not looking to find more than one option, we want to get the analysis done and come back with some definitive conclusions and recommendations before we address whether this one should be a preferred option. We'll go to the next one, please. So moving back further west to Wellington Road 34 and Concession Road 7 North, you can see that there are two options on either side of Wellington Road 34. The first one is option G, it is on the north side. And it does have some of the things that we looked for in the principles of land use that I talked about: proximity to Aberfoyle, good transportation access, frontage on Wellington Road 34, as well as on Concession Road 7. So you can see the western end of it. So it does have visibility on that road. There are some constraints for the Greenland system. It does give it an odd shape because of that. And there's gently rising topography. So it's not the most rolling, but it does have some topographical issues. There are some housing clusters nearby. There are significant livestock facilities constraints with this one. If the landowner was prepared to remove the livestock facilities, that would remove that constraint. So we're hoping to have some conversation with them about their future plans. And this one ends up on a net basis being under 30 hectares in area because of some of the constraints that we're seeing. And we'll go to option H, please. So this one is directly opposite option G. It is 34 hectares in area. When we net out the natural heritage system, it becomes 30 hectares. So it is that minimum 30. It has similar positive attributes as option G, including proximity to Aberfoyle, the road network, Wellington Road 34. It has minimal greenlands constraints and a similar gently rising topography, but not rolling topography. There are some greenlands issues, as you can see at the western end. The greenlands are being protected, so there wouldn't be visibility from concession 7. There is the same housing cluster that you can see that impacts option G and similarly has livestock facilities constraints. We'll go to the next slide, please. So our next steps are these. We're here this evening to give you this overview. Members of the community will see the same information later this evening at the community center. We will respond to the feedback we received. So I have colleagues here who will be taking notes as well as taking notes this evening. We'll be preparing what we call the phase 5 report, which will be the preferred land option after we get the feedback to make sure we're on the right track. We haven't missed anything. We incorporate people's feedback and come forward with a preferred recommendation and some more details on how that would be implemented. And then finally, phase 6 will be the more even further detailed implementation with implementation tools to establish the development framework. We'll go to the next slide, please. So this is the timeline for the project. It's on 2 slides. You can see over to the right, we are in phase 3, which I've given you a brief update on, which was the detailed planning study. And then to the next slide, really phase 4 on the left-hand side of this slide is where we're at this evening. And it's the one that we're looking forward to having conversations with you, as well as members of the community this evening. I think that's the last slide of the presentation, other than to say thank you and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Great presentation. I want to also thank Sarah. I mean, you would likely remember when you started this project, it was called Arceta.
Yeah.
It was very much, try to find a way to get some growth for Puslinch to make it fit in the current PPS, which was more challenging back then. And that turned into Arceta, and now it's turned into Puslinch by Design because the rules have changed 400 times since you started. But really appreciate the determination and the work you've put into this with our staff on this. It's very important to this community. It's likely to set us up for a very long time to be sustainable. So thank you again. So I'll turn it over to council.
Yeah, thank you. I would echo all of those comments. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. I just have some kind of random, all of my. I just wanted to ask you, in the report, like the phase 3 report, it says that although 30 hectares are needed, more is actually being recommended than that. And I'm just wondering if is there an ideal amount? And I kind of heard you touch on it in your presentation, but I was wondering if you're looking specifically at just one of those options, or if it's a combination of bits and pieces of multiple options to make up whatever that number of hectares needed is required.
So that's a really great question. Initially, we will look to one option. It is a minimum of 30 hectares. You want to make sure that you have some capacity so that you're not hamstrung by the real estate market, or, if one landowner decides not to move forward and you're 32 hectares and that person's 10 hectares, then you're really down to 22. And so you want to make sure that you have that flexibility to respond to land ownership, and that industrial developers have the opportunity to respond to the land market as well as the developability. So getting, the individual driveways and roads in, and the stormwater ponds and all of those things based on the type of development they're going to bring forward. We would look at potentially more than one option if we're finding that either they don't perform well, or there's 2 that maybe perform well, and they may together be more than 30 hectares, but they're either both really good options and you just don't want to pick one, or if there's a reason to pursue one and then top it up with another one. It will all come out in the evaluation criteria in phase 5.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, so in each of those, you mentioned that in each option, there's sort of like a gross and a net hectares that was calculated based on what's developable when you take out the greenlands and the aggregate. And I was just wondering whether you've done it already or whether you are looking to do it, is to calculate what the net would be if you also removed some of the sensitive land uses like the NDS and the the housing clusters and things, what you end up with then, is that something? In my mind, I look at it and I think, well, that would show which option has the least impact to what's currently or existing there already. Does that make sense in terms of evaluating it that way, or that's not really how you look at it?
We've gone partway there, so we have put wherever there's residential houses and they're shown in yellow on the air photo of each option. We've outlined them and then we put a 70-meter distance from them. So we're not gonna go any closer. The designated lands won't go any closer. So that provides a distance that meets provincial guidelines. In terms of the MDS, for most of the options, we can manage around it. It's just options G and H, because of the presence of what's on one, I think it's on option G, it creates that MDS issue. But we know that we've had discussions with the landowner at the last open house and public meeting. We're certainly open to discussions with the landowner again and what their intentions are. And if there's a way to address that either through policy or policy working with the landowner, those are good options. And we can deal with that if G or H become the preferred choices. But for the other ones, for the most, well, B has a lot of agricultural constraints, but most of the other ones we can work around it.
And just in regards to existing agricultural and livestock uses, I just wanna confirm that the study isn't looking to sort of force existing agricultural and livestock operations out. The intent is to sort of build in protections that allow those to still continue, should that option be considered that has livestock or agriculture. Is that?
That's
am I
correct.
understanding
Yes,
that correct?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And just more out of curiosity, but if there is an agricultural or a livestock operation in one of those options, what are some of the mitigation measures that we can look at in terms of that MDF, like that distance in between? Is there things that we can do to mitigate or to reduce that MDS, or are we strictly looking to stay outside of that 300?
The most important thing is to stay out of those circles. Because it's livestock and it's manure storage. Okay, well,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had a good understanding of that. And then my last question is, the accessibility to transportation infrastructure and the parcel, well, both parcels actually that run alongside Road 20 don't necessarily currently have direct access to the Hanlon. They do sort of through via side Road 20. So I'm just wondering like how that gets sort of weighed and evaluated, regardless of how it gets mapped out or whatever. There would be some kind of road upgrade or new road infrastructure that needs to go in there. And I'm just, where does that fit into the evaluation?
so the analysis of transportation infrastructure does look at how well each option performs. And if you think of, I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's basically is a 5-point scale. So one end is very good, one end is very bad, and in between. And it is one of the factors that we consider in terms of assessing each option. And you're right about options B and C. And side Road 20, it's not the best transportation infrastructure. You know, there isn't direct access to the Hanlon. They would have to, if that was selected, there either have to be an internal new road or some sort of design option that drove the traffic down to Wellington Road 34.
And does that, like, is there one sort of evaluation criteria that gets more heavily weighted than another, or how?
No, you know, we looked at options to weight the evaluation criteria and we looked at options that scored it. In the end, it is more of a qualitative analysis. If we started weighting things, you know, agriculture may be more important to one sector of the community versus transportation access versus visibility on Highway 401. And we can start to turn ourselves into pretzels trying to weight them. So it is more of a qualitative analysis. And all of the things that we talked about, they will be in the evaluation criteria, plus a few other things about developability and the ability to get an internal road network properly. And in the end, we anticipate we will get to a very short list and a recommended option. But it's most important for us that council members of the community understand what the advantages and disadvantages are and how each option did on the evaluation criteria. And there may be things that are more important to council that if an option performs really, really well, and that may be the selected option. But it's also that we need to go through this process as well and get people's feedback before we do the evaluation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilor Bill?
Thank you. I also have a bunch of questions all over the place, but I'm gonna use my questions that came from your presentation today. First of all, at the very beginning, you talked about large parcels of land. What is a large parcel of land? What are people wanting, or what have you heard?
So it's the reason.
And why?
Okay, so let's start with the why, okay?
Okay.
The reason for larger parcels of land is it gives you more flexibility in how they develop in terms of where the roads are, where the stormwater facilities are, where the driveways are into the internal parcels. And it gives you more flexibility if you have multiple people coming forward that want to develop, because then you can start to work with them to tailor the parcel size to what they want. Large parcels, I would say they're probably 4 or 5 hectares would be a large parcel.
I was picturing large for the purpose of large buildings and large storage areas and things like that, which I don't think is what we, we're wanting to see a lot of, specifically truck parking and things like that. But okay, so that helps me. It gives flexibility.
Right.
So how are then the lot sizes determined? Once we say we've got 30 hectares, is it based on need? Is it based on want? Or are we determining the sizes ahead of time?
So you can deal with it through the zoning bylaw in setting parcel size through minimum parcel size through the zoning bylaw. You're going to need a minimum parcel size for the servicing anyway, because it's going to be privately serviced. And then we can set in the official plan the importance of a mix of parcel sizes, and then it's who's coming forward to develop the property. They'll either need to create the individual lots through plan subdivision or individual severances. They'll need to service it. There'll need to be a servicing plan. So it's then starting to fit all those fine grained development pieces together.
Okay. Touching on what Councilor Gorda said about weighted evaluation, that was my first instinct, was why don't we set our standards of what we think is really important in the community? I haven't seen or read anything about any hydrogeological sensitive areas. So I would like to know, now that we have all these options, which ones are sitting on really sensitive, hydrogeological areas that are, could put the community more at risk in terms of water. So to me, that would be a really heavy thing to weight. If we know, one land is in a really solid, great area in terms of, for keeping the different aquifers, thank you. Then that would be one I would weight heavier over another. So I don't know, I'm just gonna kind of leave that for a comment. But where and when are we gonna start to see some hydrogeological information shown in the reports?
So there is information in the phase 2 report on the natural heritage system. We will be using that information to apply the natural heritage criteria in the evaluation.
So that'll come in to a more like precise evaluation now. Okay. My next question was, in terms of the 70-meter setback, would we be able to reevaluate all the different options if we were to increase the setback to see if they still met the criteria? So if we were to say, we don't want 70-meter setbacks now, we want 200-meter. I'm wondering if it would reduce some of our options. Could we reevaluate based on setbacks?
It would take some of the options out. We have used the land use compatibility guidelines for industrial facilities. D6 is the name of it.
Okay.
That the province of Ontario requires be used. They are, if you Google D6 guidelines Ontario, you will hit that website. And it describes the rationale for the different setbacks. It's based by class of industry. So class 1, very light industry. Class 2 would be medium. Class 3 would be the heavy stuff like a steel mill or a heavy manufacturing plant. We have used the class 2 guidelines, so no option goes any closer than 70 meters to the property line of an existing residence or residential cluster. Now, as we move forward and we look at the official plan policies, it's not that there's going to be buildings at the property of any option. You know, there are going to be setback requirements, there are going to be landscaping requirements as development proceeds. So on the designation, it is 70 meters, but then on the development, there will be more buffering.
Well, I think you answered the one question for option B and C. My question was just, yeah, access to the new interchange road. So as of now, there's no access to the new interchange road?
No.
Okay. You did mention having a conversation with one landowner. At what point in the process do we reach out to all these different landowners to kind of understand what their future plans are and or neighboring neighbors to the proposed options?
So Courtney can speak to the notification process and the notification area, but for the first open house and the work we did in September with members of the community, people in the study area all received a notice, and anybody who attended has been kept up to date with the work.
Okay, good. And then my understanding, what if we chose, I'm just trying to think of different scenarios, but what if, say, the landowner you were talking to, who's agricultural, doesn't ever want to sell it or wants to pass it on to their kids and wants to keep it agricultural? How does that work for the purpose of this gaining land for employment?
So it's important that we do have those conversations with landowners, and you know, even at the first open house, there are people who are currently designated rural employment who are not interested in having their land sold and developed. The municipality is not acquiring the lands to develop them. It would be on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. This is why it's important to designate more than 30 hectares, why we say a minimum of 30 hectares, because there are, as I said, when Councillor Goyda asked, there are variabilities in the land market and who's interested in selling and when, and there may be landowners who are not interested in selling. So you want to provide yourself with a really good area to maximize the options, to implement the vision for the community.
You don't want it all just meal putting it together. Sorry, I'm just gonna switch to my. I did have a question. I think one of the property letter, it's called, talked about actually being on the Periscope Marine. What regulations are there in place for not building on the Periscope Marine? And can we just say we don't want that because of that?
You in the end could choose that. There really are not protections of the Periscope Marine the way there are for things like the Oak Ridges Marine.
Okay. So if we were waiting the hydrogeological functions, then that property, in my mind, would not be a good choice because of that. Okay, I had, and maybe Sarah can help me with this, but I'm struggling, and I know some of the residents are not. I feel like I don't have a really big picture of what current, economic or current lands we have for economic growth that are being used, not being used, sitting vacant. I know they're already counted as, you know, being used or unavailable for that, but when I drive through our industrial area, you know, I see a lot of spaces that are not being used, they're sitting vacant, and so then I have residents saying, why are we looking for more land, taking up agricultural stuff, when we have space already designated that's not getting used? So is there kind of a layering mapping or anything where we can see currently what's available for people to be accessing now? Like, how do we get that information?
It's probably, we can probably
Yeah.
both answer that, but if I may, I'll answer from the county's side of things, and how that 30 hectares was determined. The county maintains an inventory of, all residential land and industrial land. And so anything that is vacant designated would have been factored into your land need to 2051. And anything that's been built on, that also is accounted for and deleted. So you still need more land. All of that has been accounted for. So anything that's zone designated and might still be vacant would be accounted for as vacant land supply. And that's been tallied, but you still need more land beyond that. So it's all part of the calculation. And we do have mapping of that. It could be better. I'm speaking for the county, because it's hard to graphically represent. There are so many parcels in Puslinch and the various, but we have tables that have all the acreages, all the accounting for the status of something as it moves through the development improvements process, and we're constantly updating and maintaining that list.
Okay, so what if we do designate some areas, we start to develop them, the current folks that are in our industrial park come out to this new area, but we hear that they like large parcels. Now, what's happening to our current industrial area that now has tiny little parcels that nobody wants? We're gonna have a ghost town of industrial area. How do we know that it's all going to get used? It's sort of my
Do you
big,
want to do that one? I mean, I don't expect there to be a mass exodus of people on, you know, existing stable businesses in your industrial area now that are going to go on mass to
the new area.
I mean, I'm not an economist, but that's certainly not the intent of what we're doing here. You know,
Yeah, it's not generally what we see, in terms of people relocating unless they've just outgrown their existing property and they can't acquire property around them
That's where I'm
to
thinking.
expand.
Yeah.
So, but it's also true that people will acquire multiple parcels in order to develop, because sometimes it's just easier to do that than deal with bringing new land to market, particularly if it's a larger parcel and they don't need all of it.
I'll leave that. I think I'm good. Talked about contacts, so that's good. I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thanks again for the presentation. I want to start by saying, you know, this study and the goal of this in my mind is to set the township up for, you know, growth for many generations. And Example I'll use is Erin, when the green belt was coming in. My understanding is they did a massive boundary expansion because new policy was coming in. They are reaping the benefits of that decision 20 years later. We have Morriston that, you know, the council of the day was, in my understanding, was told Morriston would not be put in the green belt. Thus didn't do an expansion, did not change boundary, did not identify lands. Then the green belt gobbled it up. For 20 odd years later, well,
I think that's good.
it is good until the budget comes along, and you don't have growth and you have 9% increases. You know, so this is to give growth to the township for many, many, many years in the future. The policies have been changing drastically, but a lot. I'll say a lot. When that 30 hectares first came into play, it's my understanding that need was done when there was a growth ceiling. So there was a county-wide look at how much employment lands we had, the most that could be identified in the need was 30 hectares. Here it said a lot here, 30 hectares, 30 hectares. To me, that was from an old study that gave us no. Where I'm going with this is that the 30 hectares is not the target in my mind. 30 hectares gave us the permission to start, to look. I want to ensure that we are setting up lands to be identified that are near these corridors. And yes, they have challenges with MDS, but MDS will be dealt with the owners of the property when they try to develop. I don't feel it should restrict any properties. Because, like I said, I think it's G and H or two. The G has the farm, the cattle. It could be 25 years, then they finally get rid of the cows. And now that land across the street doesn't have the restrictions. So that means lands, because we have to shoot for a bigger target, can be developed over here. Then these other ones will come online as situations change. To get focused solely on 30 hectares, I feel with all the challenges we have with water, with cows, with roads, we need a bigger net so that we can get some growth to make it sustainable. So I would, in my opinion, I would like to see A, E, and F not go through the, what did you call it? Detailed
yeah.
analysis. And I would like you to consider putting holding provisions on them for the future. Because they have significant challenges. I think the other balance of candidates are much more appropriate to go through the detailed process on. So the holding provision would then just say to the landowners, I believe there's another property in the county that have a holding on it that may or may not be coming online. It just gives an indication that to future people that buy houses in the area, that, hey, there could be something there in the future. So, I like the terms when you said advantages versus disadvantages of each of the candidates versus saying A or B, you know, one or two. Because I'm of the opinion that other than A, E, and F, I'll get to decide what 21 so minute, but for me, they all have their challenges. I feel unless there's something hydro G, something environmental the same, stay out. I think we should look at them all. I would say for the 20th side road, a big component of that for me is a service road. 20th side road is a non-starter, but you have to also look at the dark purple. Those are employment lands that have been designated for, would I be incorrect or like way off if I said in the late 90s? They were identified and they haven't been brought online. This is another example of why we should maybe cast the net bigger because we've had employment lands, but it's access. So with adding, if we keep C and whatever the other one is, the north one in with the caveat that not supportive of any traffic on 20 side road, that maybe we could find business partners. I guess maybe business partners. Is there a possibility that you get developers that pay for a road, you know, a service road, because it'll bring on, you know, if that's the criteria. If this service road goes down here, it brings on X amount of acres that have been identified since '99. So these are the things that are important to me. I think that's what I have. I like the 70-meter setback with P6 guidelines. I'm feeling I have to go do some reading on that. That's the first I heard that reference, but that seems like it's a minimum standard for land use compatibility
It-
kind of.
Yeah, it is a well-used standard in Ontario to assess land use compatibility between industrial facilities and what are called sensitive land uses. So it's the residential. It's daycare centers, schools, nursing homes, that type of thing.
But I just think that every one of them is gonna have different challenges, or some will have similar challenges, but they're all gonna have their own set of challenges. And that's why, we gotta consider most of them. Those are my comments. A, E, and F, I feel, should be at the most important provision, and the balance of them gives the pros and cons. I don't even know how a service road would even be, we had some limited discussion on that. Is it even a possibility for a municipality to approach landowners and ask for, them to build a road? 'Cause I know it's pretty high level, pretty early discussion, but
Yeah, and we are working on some of our new development standards, our guidelines and things like that this year. It's on the corporate work plan, so I think that's a great place to kind of dig into how would we manage that if we had like timing, like thinking about timing of developments coming online and how to fund something like that. So it's on the radar for this year to kind of work through that and figure out what works best based on other municipalities and how they do it.
I think that's all I have. Sarah, I know I stood out some stuff there, everything, but shaking your head no at.
No, sorry, that was the twitch.
Yeah. Already twitches a lot.
I have the twitch, yes, more too. No, I did, if I may, it would be helpful to have some clarification on the hydrogeological question. Because, I know that you use a consulting hydrogeologist, and that isn't kind of hardwired into the study as far as I know. So is
We have
that
some
something?
information, but not detailed information that a hydrogeologist would provide.
So I'm wondering if, does council want to retain their hydrogeologist for that? Or how far might you want to go? Or do you want to have an offline conversation about that? Just don't want it to be missed. How
is hydrogen typically addressed on a per site basis? So let's just say that let's look at him now, as I'm trying to talk. Paris Gulf Marine, say that we're a site 5 years from now is to identify, rezone, all those things. I think it's similar to Claire Mulvey. We're putting a whole subdivision on top of that thing. It will be reviewed at site plan, and concerns will be brought up and raised and addressed at that point. And is there even, that's what's,
Too late.
is it? I guess that's the question, is it too late, or is that the typical, mode of business, or?
So I think it's probably a discussion to have, and to dig into a little bit more offline, because I hear the reference to the Claire Mulkey, and I think that was the secondary plan when we were reviewing it, and so there is value, I think, in looking at a high level, maybe at this point, and looking at the options, but certainly when a development comes forward, just like plan control or rezoning, whatever that planning application would be, there is a detailed review that looks at all of that and looks at management options for whatever it may be, stormwater, runoff,
So,
yes, that sort of thing. We also engage our source water, our risk official in those discussions too, to see if those are sensitive areas in the township or within the WAPA. So all of that's sort of done at a later stage, but I do think there's value in maybe just having that discussion at this stage, what does that look like?
Mapping the WAPAs could be.
We have that mapping, and we have that available.
I think
to us,
you've
yeah.
already looked at that.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll go back and take another look at it.
And I think, just where my twitch might have come from is, that, when we did that analysis for the 30 hectares, we already, I think the difference for Puslinch is it's rural, and the growth plan had a very clear policy which is why we came up with the study area, and I think we do have more flexibility now. And you can also, we've talked about, identifying future employment plans, like future strategic employment areas, and, I don't want you to have to go through this process once every 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
I can totally see that, and if there's a way that we can, you know, use all the good work that you're doing to kind of signal where the next goes, I think that's just a good use of everybody's time and effort.
Well, you just reminded me, and there's been so many legislative changes proposed from the provincial government. There was a point where they were talking greenbelt expansion.
Yeah.
And it was from the south of Guelph. But it was all,
It was all of this.
and what would have happened then to us?
Yep.
So that just triggered in my mind, and I'm not anti-greenbelt. I think greenbelt is a wonderful thing, but without a sewer pipe and municipal water, rural deployment lanes are a ticket. So having some of that identified and protected from future political decisions that would have major impacts on our local community is important, more important, so. But, yeah, sorry, you reminded me of that.
No, and that's one of the reasons why we put the study policies in place, because it might, who knows what the future might hold.
Yeah. Okay, so, like, spur any thoughts?
You did spread first.
Okay, thank you for your present, no, just kidding.
Just when you said option A is out, what is it about option A that is in your mind not feasible?
So I thought not right now, that's why I thought holding provision. Few more homes in there with what I wrote here, and I didn't say it, is I'm trying to get traffic out of Aberfoyle. And I felt that there would lead to more commercial traffic through Aberfoyle, which we don't have control over. Now, speed cameras are doing a fantastic job. I don't know, does anybody else notice less commercial traffic through there? I feel like I see less trucks.
I think you're right.
They go around.
Yeah.
So, sorry, commercial truck drivers, but it is a living community, it's supposed to be people's community. So that's why that one and the natural heritage challenges, so that's why I thought if we're gonna dive into the detail, that one I felt could wait. So for me, it was holding provision. That's where I was at on that one.
I also had A, E, and F as
Um,
both. You know.
Sorry, finger on the pen, so I wasn't sure.
No, I'm good, okay.
All right. Anything you need clarity from us on?
No, we've been taking notes. I have colleagues here, Denise and Max and sitting with Sarah, and we'll be taking more notes tonight. We will prepare a summary of what we've heard and responses. And I really appreciate the conversation and feedback. It's going to help quite a bit with phase 5.
So not just are you fine with them not doing the detailed analysis of A, E, and F, but maybe report back on holding provision or, you know, as Sarah Wilhelm mentioned, you know, the next kind of component. And you said just now you were kind of a no on A, E, and F, where I wasn't quite a no, I was a maybe.
Well, I'm trying to in my head, I'm saying what would be my first, second, third choice. I'm going down the line. So those 3 are at the bottom. So I thought we're trying to limit what our choices are. Let's just get limiting.
No, that does help, because, you know, they'll maybe focus more time, and unfortunately, Mr. Curtis, once you go ahead and put you on the spot, but.
Like if you, well, I mean, we've already said that E is out. You've already said that E is.
That's right.
F would be definitely at the bottom of my list, just based on its proximity to the residential across. I guess A, I haven't really.
That's fine.
I'm on the fence. I'm
That's
not really like one way or the other. I would like to hear the public feedback, if there is public feedback on A before saying sure it's out, but.
No, that's good. I think that gives a little bit of direction. I haven't messed up in this, John. It's good. Always good. All right, can I get a word for that, please? Receive as information, Mr. Daly. Mr. Gray. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Confirmatory bylaw?
Yep, let the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed to open council. Bylaw 2025-035, being bylaw to confirm the procedures of council for the corporation of the township of Clifton should have been held on the 26th day of February 2025.
Can you move it? That's great.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, you're back. I'm back. You're back. I'm sorry. And, all in favor? Okay, and adjournment?
Yes, council hereby adjourns at 6:06 p.m.
Councilor Spillis? Bailey? All in favor? Carried. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Very nice. And we'll see you